You join me now inside the Lightning eMotors Transit, and we're going to take it for a drive like we do with every car we test in a city, highway, and yes, we're even going to try some performance driving in the canyons with this thing. Now, most importantly, I want to focus on city driving with this car because I think this is where, or I should say van, this is where it's really useful, especially in delivery applications that they can sell. So what we're going to do is key on. You don't even need to turn it to the crank position all the way. I'm going to turn off the music. You just turn it on. Everything is good to go. It always starts up with a couple error messages, which I think is funny. Starts up with fuel level low. Well, that's because there's no fuel tank installed here. And then it's good to go. Then it's just like a normal Transit, which is kind of neat. There's a couple little bugs that I think they're still working out. It's hard to say if those are on this because this is a pre-production mule. This is like their test vehicle. But occasionally the traction control light comes on, and then after about a minute of driving, that goes away. But honestly, you just get in, start it, put it in gear, and go in silence. And it really is so surreal driving something like this without a big engine and transmission. It's really quite nice, actually. Now we're going to take it for a little drive. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about this van. And the first things first is all of the qualities of the Ford Transit. Like this one's a 350 HD, which is the biggest, tallest, longest Transit you can get. It's the dually. All of those good qualities still retain. So you have a normal, good feeling braking system. You have an amazing turning radius, you have good ride quality, and overall really good build quality. We're at 80% state of charge. We have an indicated 103 miles of range projected. And the interesting thing about this range calculation is I've been driving this for a few hundred miles this week. It does not adapt to your driving style. So it's sort of like the way Tesla does it, where it's a rated range calculation based off of the available energy left in the battery pack. So if it says you have 125 miles at a full charge, which is about what this one shows, then if you drive it really aggressively up a mountain, it's still going to show 125. It's basically just a set rating calculation, which I find pretty interesting. In terms of differences between this and the normal Transit, well, actually there are none. The cargo capacity, for example, this one's a 15-seat version. You can get an 18-seat version if you get a smaller battery. I'll talk about that in a second. It is all identical. Even the fuel filling cap where you put in the electricity is in the exact same placement as the combustion fuel, the dinosaur juice filling spot, which is actually a little annoying if you have short cables, because what you need to do is you need to pull right up to the charging station and then try and get the cable all the way back. If you have a charging station you can pull up next to, it works pretty well. But if you do have to stretch the cable, basically if you have a front pull-in station, I had one where I had to pull in forwards, I had to get out the passenger side because the cable's blocking the driver door. I found that to be a little bit annoying, but again, I think if you're buying these, you're not going to be using public charging for the most part. You'll have a fleet installed charging solution that works perfectly with the size of the vans, built for these things from the ground up, and I don't foresee that being a problem for many use cases. Now I do have a couple things in the back that are flying around as well, so sorry about that. In terms of drivetrain, what do we have here? Well, if you haven't already, you should go over to Inside EVs because we have a full factory tour of Lightning eMotors, and we actually go through how to make a Transit from how they arrive at their factory all the way to completion. It's super neat, it's really in depth, it's really long, but it's a great video to see how these things are put together. So what they do is they take the combustion engine out, they build their electric drivetrains in-house, and then they go in. Basically, I don't think they manufacture any of the parts, they just have suppliers that build everything together into what they call their sled. Now, this particular one is an 86 kilowatt hour battery pack version, which means it has 2 battery bricks of 43 kilowatt hours each. And I don't know if 86 is totally usable capacity or if that's gross. I don't have the full spec details on this, but either way, it's been more than enough range for me to get around the city in, no problem. I've driven this thing now on shoots. We shot the Volvo V90 cross-country review, we shot a Prius review, we shot some Archimoto stuff, all out of this van, and we've been driving it a ton around town. It's been totally fine. And that's the best part about this van, is you leave in the morning with it fully charged. For example, you arrive at the depot and it's charged up. You get in, there's no engine warm-up, you have pretty much instant heat out the vents, which is really nice. I will say the heater is not crazy strong, but it's also a huge cabin to warm up. I think they have the ability to add vehicle preconditioning at some point in the future, which I'd love to see, which is, you know, all your vans are going out at 6 o'clock in the morning, let's just say. You can preheat the battery pack, drivetrain, and cabin maybe an hour before they leave and use that shore power to supply the electricity. So when you get in, you don't have to use all that electricity on onboard storage to warm everything up. I think that would be really neat. But driving around the city, the benefits of electric are immediately apparent. First off, you never use the brake pedal in this, unless you're coming to a complete stop. But look, we are at, again, 75% state of charge. Batteries are pretty cold, so we're not even gonna get full regen. But I lift off and it's just brakes. I'm not touching the brake pedal at all. It is just slowing down. No one's behind me. I'm not gonna bug anyone. And it brings you to about 5 miles per hour. And then you use, yeah, maybe 4 miles per hour, and then you use the physical braking system to bring you to 0. So really nice regenerative braking system, super smooth. I love how strong it is, and I love how it's all controlled on the accelerator pedal. What that means is for most driving, you're not having to lift your foot off the pedal, onto the brakes, off the brakes, onto the accelerator. It's sort of a one pedal-esque driving experience. You do have to put your foot on the brake for a stop though. A couple things I'd like to see though are brake hold. For example, I'm sitting here at a light. If I lift my foot off the brake, it creeps forward, which is nice, especially if you're on a hill. It'll hold you on a hill. They're very proud of their hill hold technology, but I wish it would use the service brakes to stay on, and that's probably a limitation because the factory Ford Transit doesn't have a hill or a braking hold feature like some other vehicles do. In terms of acceleration, well, you can definitely tell they detuned it off the line to not just roast the tires. It's a 160 kilowatt motor, about 225 horsepower, but almost 800 pound-feet of torque. So I'm doing 30, for example. You can see other cars around me for reference. I'm gonna put my foot down and you can see it just rockets forwards for something this big. It's honestly sprightly. I mean, it's not fast, but certainly sprightly. On our TikTok Out of Spec Studios, I did a 0 to 60. So if you're interested, you can go check that out. So there are so many benefits to driving electric as well, such as just delivery scenario. So what I'm gonna do is pull into a neighborhood, for example, this one here on the left, and we're gonna simulate a stop-start condition, something where you have to get in and get out. I'm gonna sit in the seat, but a lot of park and drive, and see how this goes. I actually haven't tested this yet, but I imagine a lot of last mile delivery services would use these vans, especially in city environments, similar to here in Fort Collins, where we're all kind of in a small-ish town. You just have to drive from house to house to house. This makes so much more sense than the diesel sprinters that Amazon are using these vans as testing. So let's just say we're gonna pull here. Sorry, I'm confusing everyone. You're not getting any packages. We're gonna stop, put it in park. I'll get out, deliver it, put it in drive, wide open throttle, instantly goes when you put it in drive, which is nice. And then we're gonna come to another stopping point. Braking system is great. Now, this is interesting. I'm noticing this just now. Both times there, when I put it in park, you could hear some clunking. And I think what's happening is there's a little slop in the drivetrain. There always is on any vehicle. The longer it is, the more. And when you take it out of drive and into park, it unloads the drivetrain and it clicks around. It just sounds a little clunky and unpremium. I'd love some sort of rubber bushing that they could put back there to sort of dampen that effect of the drivetrain slop when putting it in park. It doesn't hurt anything. Amazing torque off the line. If you need to pull right into traffic, look, we're already at the same speed of the vehicle in front of us, 30 miles an hour. So much better than the diesels. Almost no noise at low speed, which is really great. You do get a whir of an electric motor. We'll talk more about that, especially on the highway, but around the city, it's really nice and quite pleasant. And it sounds kind of cool. Again, we'll pull over here, come to a stop. We're gonna deliver packages, park, clunk, and then you can get out. Yeah, that clunk's gonna be kind of annoying, I think. Yeah, I can't say I'm a huge fan of that. I have a parking brake, a physical lever right down here, and then back to drive, and we're good to go again. So for this type of use case, repetitive, constant stop and start, you just can't beat this drivetrain. And it drives just like a factory vehicle. Like, this feels straight from a automaker. It doesn't feel like a retrofit or conversion or whatever technically they're doing. It just feels great. Let's go down some of these smaller streets where there's not as much room. All of the benefits of the Transit, again, are here, that even though it's a long wheelbase, it's quite nimble. Steering is unbelievably light. Rear wheel drive makes it quite easy to actually maneuver if you're trying to slide it around. I had this truck on some snowy roads and I was able to do some skids. We're gonna try a U-turn here. So here I'm gonna turn all the way, and super easy steering and amazing turning radius. Also, no sense of bucking or drivetrain issues under full steering lock. A lot of long vehicles sometimes get this hopping effect, especially if they have a limited slip rear diff. This loves to turn all the way around, which is great. It retains ABS, it retains stability control, it retains traction control, and drives like a factory vehicle. And on top of that driving like a factory vehicle, it retains the Ford vehicle warranty as well. You see, Lightning eMotors is Ford EQVM certified. What that means is they are the basically alternative fuel qualified vehicle modifier. And so that means Ford comes into the Lightning eMotors factory that we toured in that video I was mentioning, and about once a month they come, or once every 2 months they come and service their, or I should say audit their operations, making sure they're not adjusting the van. So Lightning eMotors warranties the driveline components, and then Ford warranties the vehicle components, such as you know, if your headlight blows out or if this armrest stops working, you would just bring it right to a Ford dealer and they'd be able to work on it no problem. I actually took this van by a Ford dealer and everyone was super interested in it and they absolutely loved it. People were like, this is the coolest thing ever. It truly makes so much sense to me for this application. Now, in terms of cost and pricing, because I know you're going to ask while we're still testing it in a city environment, this is a $90,000 upgrade to a regular Transit. The window sticker on this Transit out of the box from Ford, it's a no option 350 HD. It has total options of $2,500. I don't know what those would be. Oh wait, it's over here on the left side. Let me pull over. We'll simulate another delivery while we go through what's on this vehicle. Here we go. So it's an XL rear-wheel drive 2020 350 HD. It came with a 3.5 liter V6 with a 10-speed transmission. That's all been ripped out. It has a reverse sensing system, keyless entry pad, HD trailer towing package, although they do not recommend towing with this electric drivetrain. It's got the Sync 4-inch screen, cruise control, which does not work on this vehicle. That's one thing you do lose. Running boards, that's nice. 2 additional keys. Privacy glass. Oh, it's got the dark glass all the way in the back. That's really neat. I like that for sure. And it's E85 flex fuel capable. Well, not anymore. So yeah, oh, I meant to look at the price on this one too. Whoops. So this thing is 50 grand, $49,195. So 50 grand plus 90, you're into this thing, again, $140,000. Now, they tell me that California has a ton of incentives, particularly for a vehicle like this. You can buy it directly from a Ford dealer, and before you actually take delivery, you can send it to Lightning eMotors for this conversion, and it's actually sold as a new electric vehicle. They have an accreditation with California to sell new EVs, so they qualify for all the tax credits, all of the business credits for having a medium or large duty electric vehicle, which is way more money than a passenger vehicle, and it actually really takes down a lot of this cost. So from a pure cost perspective, even though you got to spend the 90 grand up front, businesses look at the bottom line, and if you're driving this on a day-to-day basis, if you are running them constantly, your maintenance pretty much goes out the window. And I guess there's so many orders for these things, it sounds like they just can't even build enough of them for years to come, that it just makes sense. Look at the acceleration here. We're wide open throttle, 35, 40, 45, 50. I mean, it's more than enough. Again, we are unloaded right now, but still, it's drives amazing. It's really fun. I'm not even touching the brakes here. So from a driver happiness perspective, you just can't beat the electric conversion. So we've learned amazing in the city. I would really like to see this driveline clunk. Oh, when I put it in park there, it didn't make the noise. It might just be under certain conditions. But other than that, one little clunky noise when you put it in park, This thing is way better than any diesel last mile delivery vehicle. It just makes so much sense. And the reason, or I should say one last thing before we go up into the mountains and on the highway, one thing that I have asked the company is, well, what happens when GM launches their medium duty options and electric options and Ford has the e-Transit? Well, apparently, oh, new Defender, nice. Apparently the companies are only building, I should say Ford's only building a 150 and 250 Transit, which means your GVWR, what you can stuff in the vehicles legally, is so much lower than this 350 HD. So passenger vehicles, Ford's not going to offer. So if you need to shuttle people, for example, around a tech campus in California from a parking lot over to your office or at sports stadiums, this passenger van, they have the competitive advantage. They're going to have orders for these. Also, ambulances or other applications that require heavy weight will only work with the 350s, not the 1 or 250s. So I think Lightning eMotors will have a competitive advantage over the large bread and butter vehicles. But again, I don't think their volumes will be as high as Ford, obviously, but I think it's going to be way more than they're doing now, and they will have sustained business for years to come. I would like to dive deeper into this topic, so I have Tim Reeser, the CEO, coming on our Inside EVs podcast soon to talk about a lot of these things. For now, though, let's jump on the highway and see how it performs at speed. We are just about to jump on the highway over here, and I wanted to talk a little bit briefly about the Lightning eMotors full vehicle lineup. You'll have to stick back on this channel because in a couple videos we're going to go through all of the vehicles they offer, from full coaches to class 6 vehicles. You can make like a tow truck electric, a box truck, and you'll notice now that we're traveling at a little bit higher speed, in the Transit version is just the electric motor noise is almost ear-piercing just in the frequencies it produces. In the E450 models, like sort of their big passenger vans that they convert, again, the Transit, like I mentioned, is not their only vehicle, they mount the motors midway back, which I think is actually smart from a NVH perspective, because up here you get a lot of motor choppiness. When you come on and off throttle, you can hear it transition, and it's just a little bit unpleasant above 50 miles an hour, let's just say, especially under hard load. And what we're doing now is we're accelerating up to speed because this is a 65 mile an hour road, and we're going to test the highway capability. Now, something I was really surprised about when I first started to learn about this vehicle is it's highway capable. It can do 68 miles an hour. I don't know what it's physically rated for, but I have it at a 68 mile per hour GPS accurate that I've verified. It has no problem getting up to speed. It's really quite comfortable, actually. You can see we're doing 58, 60 miles an hour, no problem right now. The same problems like you get with the Transit are here, though. Wind kind of moves it around a little bit. Not unusual from a vehicle of this size. It is quite noisy on the highway as well. But here we go, accelerating up to big speeds. We have quite a bit of side wind. We have some wind noise coming from the mirrors. Again, this is all on the Transit side. And we have achieved maximum speed of 68 or 69, we saw, but 68 miles an hour. And one of the problems with this vehicle is cruising at max speed. It actually cannot do it for a long period of time. I've noticed on 3 or 4 different trips, when you just run at wide open throttle sitting on the limiter, it starts to back off the power. Originally, I thought this was a power limitation. I'm like, oh, it must be overheating. I spoke to one of the engineers and they said, nope, it's not overheating. What's going on is the inverter is trying to go into its efficiency setting. He called it turbo mode, and it just ends up basically limiting power to the motor. It's a software bug. The vehicle itself, hardware-wise, has no problem maintaining 68 miles an hour. Look, we're doing it uphill, no problem, and apparently it doesn't overheat doing it under normal highway driving. It's just the inverter tries to back it off. So they claim this will be fixed soon. They're working with their supplier to fix it, but I do have to note, on 2 separate occasions, I had to pull over to the side of the highway to, cruising down at 65 plus miles an hour to give it a second to think about itself, and then I would accelerate back up and all was normal. And I guess it was just tricking the inverter to go back to its normal non-turbo state, whatever he calls it. And But other than that, cruising down the highway, once that problem is solved, they have remote telematics on the vehicle, so they were able to see, yes, they confirmed that that was what was happening here. And it's actually pretty nice to drive on the highway. Now, your range is going to be significantly less on the highway, but I've done about 60 miles, 65 miles cruising at 65 plus, and I didn't even use the full battery. So you could probably get 70, 75 miles on a charge, somewhere between 60 and 65 miles an hour, which is quite impressive. I'd love to do my range testing. I just don't have enough time with it this week with this vehicle, but I think I'm going to have one back again soon where I can do some loaded and unloaded range testing for city and highway. I really want to test the range of this and then benchmark all the future medium duty vehicles that I test against it. But man, isn't this gorgeous here in beautiful Colorado? We have the amazing mountain views here in the Rockies. It's absolutely amazing. And we're driving an electric Transit. This is just the coolest thing ever. Now, our next test is going to be driving it up that mountain right there. We're going to be testing the canyon driving abilities. You see, the thing is, these vehicles are primarily used in cities and warm weather, and they kind of have an easy life. But what does not happen is driving them up mountains. However, I think an electric vehicle makes even more sense for a mountain experience than it does for city driving. The reason is you can regen down the hills and recapture all that energy. So I can't wait to try this out. I know that all of the weight down low from the battery pack should help it handle a little bit better. And while we're not going for ultimate performance, I want to make sure that this drivetrain can handle driving in an environment that's mountainous and hilly, because at the end of the day, there's still a use for vehicles for delivery purposes, for road maintenance with this drivetrain that are going to need to be able to handle sort of twisty roads and hard driving. So we're going to not go 10/10ths. We're not going to shred it up the hill, but we're going to drive it like a normal delivery driver would up some of these twisty canyon roads with huge elevation gains. And here's to hoping that it's all good with no problems, but we'll see if the thermal management system can handle it. We are now getting close to my favorite canyon road where I performance test all of our cars that we get on weekly rotation. Really nice Land Cruiser right there. Nice 200 series, that looked beautiful. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to shred this thing up the road. Now, like I mentioned, we are not going to go 10/10ths. This is not a race car. We're also not going to be expecting it to handle that well. This is a big, heavy 3500. What I'm really trying to see, though, is we have about 48% state of charge. Can we get to the top of the hill without running out? I know once we're up there, we can coast down and charge up the batteries on the downhill. So I'm interested to see if we can gain any energy on the downhill. Sometimes it's possible. If I drive real quickly, though, then it's not. But instantly, wow, it actually feels pretty nimble through here, which is pretty interesting. The other thing I'm curious about is, can the drivetrain handle the driving we're going to throw at it? Will it thermal throttle? Is it going to handle this type of load with constant regen and power? Are the batteries going to overheat? This car has a full thermal management system, and check this out. We already have someone pulling over for us here in the Transit, which is so funny. Thank you so much, appreciate that. Just gonna flash the hazards to say thank you. And we are at wide open throttle climbing up this hill. The torque is really immense. I'm gonna try and bring this to our little racetrack tomorrow and put it around to see how well it does, which I think would be neat, but this is really interesting. So I'm just gonna drive it like a delivery driver would. Gotta get the packages there on time. We're not gonna go wide open throttle everywhere, but we will, you know, go out of the corners. I'm going to try and use regen as much as possible. Actually, the body roll is almost, it's definitely not non-existent, but it is much less than you would expect. And I think people are gonna be surprised as to how well this thing is moving up and down this road. Let's just get it into the corner here. Now I have traction and stability control fully on. You can disable it, of course, being a Ford factory product. It utilizes the same factory ESP calibrations. Now I haven't really tested them in depth yet, but so far so good. Honestly, it's so fun. You got to be mindful about your turn-in because it's such a long chassis. You got to leave some room for the rear wheels to come around. Check this out. We're just getting it into the corner. Big power. Oh, the dude's even pointing at us. He was giving us a thumbs up. That was awesome. We are shredding the Transit, and it's actually, dare I say, fast. Look, we're catching up to cars. This is really good. We're at 45% state of charge. I need to keep an eye on that, because the thing is, under constant load uphill, you're going to be using a ton of power to get around. So let's see if we can get this Tundra to pull over for us. Yes, he can. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Thank you. Flash the hazards as a thank you. And we're back to wide open throttle. This is hilarious. Big power up here in the Transit. See a nice little entrance under braking. I'm not even touching the physical brakes here. I am just brushing the brake pedal. We're going to leave room for those rear wheels to come around and power out. Interestingly, no wheel spin with all of this torque, which I think is neat. And we're just running flat out up here, folks. Now, the battery pack is thermally managed. I think I was talking about this before, where you can have battery heating and also cooling, and they can cool to sub-ambient temperatures. They have a battery coolant loop chiller, basically like an AC compressor, and cools down the liquid. So if we hear the AC start to kick on, we know we've heated up stuff. But so far, it's providing not full power, but nearly full power. We're at, again, 41% state of charge, which is plenty to provide power, I would say. As EVs lose charge level, they'll also lose battery voltage, which means your overall power, because the motors just request the current, will be less. Here we go, throwing it in, big power. Hey, we got some wheel spin there on the back. Wow, this is so fun and easy to drive on a road like this quite quickly. So if you live in the mountains and you have like a loop, your delivery service that services the mountains, this might be the van for you. Look at this. I think we're thermal throttling slightly now. It's still doing 60 miles an hour. 61 miles an hour. It is backing off the power slightly. And so what probably is happening is the motor is getting hot, I would imagine. I mean, we're moving a lot of weight up here quite quickly. I'm not going to run wide open throttle. We're just going to do this briskly now. The regen makes driving on a road like this so nice. You can definitely tell the weight distribution of the vehicle is better. I've driven normal Transits before, and I really do like them quite a lot, but I think having the batteries down in the floor is nice. Also, just having the dually set up in the rear just means it's nice and wide planted back there. It doesn't feel tippy. Definitely have driven slower normal cars up here, like a Prius I think was probably slower than this. We were actually losing speed on the uphills in the Prius. So let's see, 38% state of charge. We are chewing through the battery charge on the way up. Here's a nice little tight section through here. Get the van in under regen. And man, I would love an electric Transit racing series. Why is this so much fun? The transitions. You can shred the transitions. You don't even need to be that gentle on it. You can just throw it around. Man, people, if they only saw this thing shredding through here, must just be amazed. Truly amazed. What a machine! Oh, I love it! We are shredding an electric giant Ford Transit up a canyon road. It's really good. Wow, I have the Ford lane keeping assist on. I'm going to turn that off so I can brush the lanes if I need to without it trying to push me back in. I have it to alert. Here we are, wide open throttle on the uphill. The Prius was losing speed on this hill. This is maintaining speed, 57, the whole way up, wide open. I can see it's backing off the throttle slightly, backing off the power, and that's just because I think things are getting hot. But we got to test it. This is our job. This is how delivery workers are going to test their vehicles in a mountainous environment. Especially, we are unloaded. If you have a load in the vehicle, you're going to have to be working it much harder for these types of driving scenarios. Here we go. We are probably thermal derating here a little bit. Yeah. And then after this hill, there's a little bit of a break. Yep. We're just going to back off, let some things cool down. The Ford Transit is a ripper. Wow. So we've learned amazing in the city. The electric drivetrain is super well calibrated, I would say, to the vehicle for city driving. On the highway, it's probably not as ideal. I don't think this makes sense if you're doing long highway runs, especially as the charging maximum is only 200 amps, which is 80 kilowatts on something that's so inefficient. You're going to be getting, 1.5 miles per kilowatt hour, 1.3 miles per kilowatt hour. I think it doesn't make so much sense in those types of applications. But for short highway trips, if you have to go from the depot to the city, certainly fine. Also, that DC charging is slow, but again, if you can just top it up whenever, that's not going to hurt the battery pack. That's this big. That C rate is so low. So yeah, you can pretty much DC charge this thing all the time, I suspect, without any real negative downfall, especially with the thermal management system they have. And I got to say, this car is handling this driving better than many combustion vehicles I've mentioned, but also better than some plug-in hybrids. For example, when we got to this point, driving it nearly as aggressively, the RAV4 Prime turned off its whole electrical system because it overheated. Here in the Transit, it's not complaining at all. We're down to 27% state of charge. We're just running it hard, and it's doing it. We are now down to 20% state of charge, approaching the best part of the road through here. Big power, woohoo! Really fun. I mean, we're doing 60 miles an hour through this little road, and it is no problem for it at all. I do worry about the range on the uphills. I mean, we just started at, what, 50% nearly. So we used, let's say, 30, maybe 27% to get up here, and it's only been about 8 miles, something like this. But again, that's to be expected with a vehicle that's this heavy. I can definitely tell it's not regenning as much energy, probably because it's a little bit toasty. But we're approaching our last hill climb just up over here. I wanted to see how it does after being driven hard at low state of charge. Everything's really hot, approaching this hill climb, because this is arguably an extreme stress test. Granted, it's chilly outside. Well, the van says it's 46, but it's consistently wrong with its temperature readings. I'm not sure if that's because they must put a hot component next to the temperature sensor, but it definitely is warmer. The van always says it's warmer than it is outside. It's probably 35 degrees Fahrenheit outside right now. And here we are approaching the tight section of the road here. And man, Transits are just awesome. The gas ones too, they're pretty fun. But this thing being electric just makes it way more fun, I think. So let's get it through here. Big power. We're spinning tires on the salt. Traction control kicked on as expected, and we are running hard power on the uphill. 37, 38. That's amazing. The Prius could not do this, and this is pulling harder. I don't know why I'm comparing this to a Prius. I just think it's kind of funny. And big power. Listen to it too. Sounds really good. I gotta say, this drivetrain's well calibrated. And so this definitely proves the point that its highway ability to cruise at max speed is not limited by thermals, because this is way harder on it than cruising down the highway. The highway issue is definitely that inverter going into a sipping state. But here we are at the top of the hill, folks. We have made it. And that view is gorgeous. So it just climbed like 3,000 feet plus of elevation over a very short distance. No warning lights on the dash. Our miles per kilowatt hour is like 0.6 to 0.7 miles per kilowatt hour on our screen consistently. Now I'm letting it charge up on the regen. It's holding our speed at 37. It's actually losing speed, and we're on a really steep downhill. That regen is extremely strong. I gotta say, look, as critical as I am as many vehicles that I test, I really do push them to their limits. I am impressed that this just hauled itself up at a very reasonable pace, way faster than most everyone else on the road, and there's zero complaints on the dash. Everything seems great. We're charged up to, we've already gained 2% just going down this little section. We started at 17, we're at 19%. Call me impressed for sure. I don't know if you guys can hear the little buzzing under here, but you can definitely tell the battery chiller is active and it's cooling itself down after the hard drive up the mountains here.